watched the Backrooms movie. I didn't really like it. I thought its allegory, themes, messaging was kind of messy and could use some work, so that's what I'm going to talk about today. First, I'm going to give a quick plot summary for those who haven't watched it or forgot exactly what happened. Okay, plot summary. Clark owns a furniture store called Captain Clark's, but he aspires to be an architect and doesn't enjoy working at the store. He talks to his therapist Mary about how he and his wife separated and how he's feeling very lonely. Because of the separation, Clark is living in his store, and one night while he's sleeping, he actually finds a wall that he can walk through in the store that leads to the back rooms. The back rooms are these offices that have yellow wallpaper and fluorescent lighting, and they go on forever. And sometimes they have weird doors or objects in them, and there's always something not quite right about these rooms. So Clark explores the back rooms, and then later he brings two of his employees with him to film it. While they're filming it, the employees get taken by an unseen monster, and then Clark is cornered by this monster. The film switches POV to Mary, and she starts to search for Clark because he hasn't been showing up to their therapy sessions. So she goes to the Captain Clark's furniture store, and as she's searching, she finds the back rooms. She's exploring the back rooms, trying to find Clark, and she actually does find Clark, but he's acting very strangely, and he's acting unstable, mentally unwell, and then he actually knocks her out and kidnaps her. Mary wakes up in a room in the back rooms and is tied to a chair, and there are other backrooms creatures around her. She eventually convinces Clark to let her go, but as he's untying the chair, the monster from before who had taken the employees shows up, and now we can see clearly that he is a monstrous version of Clark himself, dressed as a pirate with monstrous features on his face and a peg leg, and he is very tall. Monster Clark chases Mary through the back rooms, and Mary is eventually able to escape by squeezing through a small crack in the walls. The room that she enters through this crack has people wearing hazmat suits in it. The men wearing hazmat suits take Mary to the office of a man who says that he is monitoring the back rooms. The man tells Mary that he originally worked for an MRI company until this MRI company discovered the back room somehow. Since then, he has been working with a team to set up cameras in the back room and monitor it and try to figure out what's going on. He asks Mary a series of questions about her experience in the back rooms, and Mary asks if she's still in the back rooms or if she's escaped into the real world. The man will not tell Mary whether she's in the back rooms or not, and Mary is becoming very panicked. In the final shot of the movie, we see a backrooms version of Mary sitting alone in a room of the backrooms, perhaps implying that Mary is still trapped in the backrooms and has not truly escaped. So that's the plot. If it seems kind of strange and meandering, that's because it was. And if it feels like there's not going to be any coherent allegory throughout that, then you would be right. Before we go into the main critiques of this film, I do want to talk about the things that I liked, because there were definitely parts of this film that I thought were really great. First of all, the aesthetics were great. It definitely looked like the backrooms with that fluorescent lighting and yellow wallpaper, which I guess you can buy on the A24 store. I don't know who really wants that, but I'm sure people are going to buy it. I also really liked the aesthetics of the regular world. It was very saturated and stylized even when the characters weren't in the back rooms. There was this whole 80s thing going on. It was set in the 80s, and it had a lot of those nostalgic elements, which I don't know if that setting was necessary for this story. I guess it's so that the characters don't have phones, because that would kind of ruin the plot. But I guess that the 80s thing works for the nostalgia aspect of the backrooms, which I know is kind of part of the whole concept. So yeah, I really like the aesthetics. Good job on that. Next thing I liked about this movie, that it got made with Kane Parsons as its director. I think it's really cool that A24 gave this relatively unestablished in the industry director just a ton of money to see his creative vision through. I think that's awesome. It's definitely what an indie movie studio should be doing. And with A24, I don't know, nowadays they're pumping out like 1,000 films a year. Half of them have super famous actors or super famous directors attached to them, and they feel less and less indie, so it's nice that they are supporting smaller film artists. Also, from what I understand, Parsons was kind of an innovator of the Backrooms with his YouTube series, so I think it's great that they went directly to the source when they were trying to figure out who could make this movie instead of just kind of stealing the idea and running with it. Final thing I really liked about this movie was the found footage aspects. I love found footage. I actually thought from the promotion that there was going to be more of that in this movie, but there was not. It was pretty small sections that were filmed with the handheld camcorder, but I still liked it. I mean, the parts that were there were good. I wish there was more, but what I got was good. Particularly, I like this scene that's about halfway through the movie that's filmed handheld, where Clark is exploring all of these different rooms in the back rooms, and it's very expository world building. It really feels like you're getting immersed in the Backrooms world, and it's super creepy. Like, there's this room with a Christmas tree, and it's super dimly lit, and there's like Feliz Navidad playing, and it's filmed from that camcorder, and it's just so creepy and so tense. And a lot of this movie was not scary, even though it's a horror movie. And I'm not saying, like, I get that it can be scary and tense without having jump scares, but it wasn't even that. Like, this part of the movie was the only part that was actually scary. So I really liked that. I also love this little Backrooms creature that has the lamp. I think he's very Lynchian and very kind of weird and abnormal. So I thought that was kind of cool. It was just like such a weird thing to put in the movie, but I liked it. I thought it worked. Now I'm going to start talking about my critiques, which are all centered around the deeper messaging and allegory of this movie. So I just wanted to preface this by saying I'm not an expert on the Backrooms. I've never really watched Backroom stuff before. I just never got into it. The first time I heard of the Backrooms was from my little brother playing a Backrooms game on Roblox, so I really don't know much about the whole lore of it. I respect it. I think it's great, very creative and cool. But yeah, I'm not an expert, so if I'm saying things that are ringing any alarm bells for those of you who are fans of the Backrooms, then I guess let me know in the comments, or you can just leave the video. That being said, from what I do know about the Backrooms, I know that the original concept doesn't really have a deeper meaning or allegory to it. Like, it just started from a post on 4chan of these creepy rooms. It doesn't mean anything. It's just like a scary thing, which is fine. It can just be scary. It doesn't have to have a deeper meaning or a metaphor to it. However, there is this relatively new dogma in horror that a horror movie has to have a deeper message. It can't just be scary, it has to say something of substance. I think it probably started around the 2010s when elevated horror became the predominant subgenre, and all of those movies started to explore deeper themes of grief or trauma. Obviously, there's exceptions to this, but if you think of all of the horror movies you've seen that have come out in the last decade, how many of them are really just the thrills and kills kind of movies that came out in the 90s and 80s? I'd say most of them are about something deeper, something that is more philosophically significant. But again, I don't think this is necessary. I don't think a horror movie has to have a deeper meaning. I think that a horror movie being scary still qualifies it to be art, and is something I still enjoy. Like, I love these elevated horror movies, but I also love slashers and campy, thrilling, early horror movies. So all that to say, I don't think this Backrooms movie should have had this weird allegorical meaning about mental health. In fact, there shouldn't have been any allegories at all. And if Parsons really wanted to have his movie be about something deeper than just scary rooms, then have it be about nostalgia. That's what the Backrooms is all about anyway. It's emotionally evocative, not intellectually evocative. The emotions that the Backrooms make you feel can't be summarized into a concrete thesis. It's more about having a feeling wash over you of nostalgia or sadness or strange familiarity. From how I see it, a perfect Backrooms movie wouldn't really be one that makes me think something. It would be one that makes me feel something. Okay, so now that we've talked about why the movie shouldn't have had a traditional allegorical structure, let's talk about what the allegory actually is. So our first subtle hint at what the backrooms might represent comes in a diegetic voiceover from Mary as one of their therapy recordings, where she says that mentally ill people tend to put up walls and perceive a warped version of reality. This came at a fresh 20-ish minutes into the movie, and it really made me roll my eyes because it really feels like they're like spoon-feeding the thesis to the audience. And then when I looked online at people reviewing it, they said they still didn't understand what the movie was supposed to be about, which is like crazy to me, but I guess that means that Kim Parsons was like right, like that was a good choice because people are too stupid to like use critical thinking. So anyway, that's how we established the main metaphor of the backrooms representing a mentally ill person's mind. The next big part of the allegory would be the people who live in the backrooms, or I guess are created by the backrooms. The backrooms creatures look very strange, and Clark says that they look like that because the backrooms misremembers them that way. So what we're supposed to get from this is that a mentally ill person might have a hard time understanding the actions of people around them. They might see other people as alien and might find it hard to relate to or find close relationships with people who may have previously been very close with them. So before I continue explaining the allegory, I do want to address something that some of you might have picked up on, which is that the backrooms is Silent Hill. It's just Silent Hill. It's a strange, eerie, yet familiar and nostalgic place that has monsters in it and represents the mind of a mentally unwell person as they try to perceive the world around them despite their illness. The protagonist puts themselves in the middle of a Manichaean story arc where they are the hero who has to fight the villains around them, representing how mentally ill people have a warped perception of themselves within the world around them. It's Silent Hill, and Silent Hill does it better. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that. Okay, back to the allegory. So Clark's employees are suggested to be killed by a monster in the backrooms, which represents how mentally ill people's perceptions of the world can hurt those around them in physical or emotional ways. Also, Clark is shown to literally eat a chunk out of one of the backrooms creatures, and he says it's okay because they're not real people, which is actually really good. Like, that's one of the best moments within this allegory because the chunk is literally made of like cotton, like furniture stuffing, which ties back to his story arc because he owns a furniture store, and it just works very well altogether to show how people who are mentally unwell might have a difficult time seeing those around them as equally human to them when they're so trapped in their own experience. And it even shows how when mentally ill people hurt those around them, it's not antagonistic or evil. It's because they're like misguided and their perception of the world is warped, and it's not really their fault. So that part was done well. Good job on that. Then later, when Clark is ready to unkidnap Mary, the Captain Clark monster, I'm not going to call it an entity. I think that's stupid. I get that that's what it's called in like the lore, but I'm not going to call it that. So the monster literally represents the kind of superego of Clark and kind of just hammers down, for those who haven't already gotten it, that Clark is kind of the villain in this story. I don't love this because I prefer the villain as the backrooms itself, the villain being the mind of the mentally ill person. Having the villain be a monstrous representation of the person basically splits this character in two, into the normal and the mentally ill, and antagonizes the mentally ill part, which isn't really great message-wise. It's kind of messy and kind of dangerous, actually, because it's saying that mentally ill people are monsters, basically. So they should have just not had this entity and the backroom should have just been the monster itself. It works better for the allegory. So anyway, this monster chases Mary through the back rooms, and like, what is that supposed to represent? Like, the allegory is really starting to fall apart because, like, is this supposed to mean that mentally ill people are harmful for their therapists? Because that's wrong. That doesn't make sense. There is maybe a possibility that they're doing like a clever thing here, which I'll explain it more later, but it would be like that the backrooms actually represents Mary's unwell mind, and the monster Clark is not really representing Clark himself, but the vision Mary has of Clark, and that chasing her represents how that vision of the worst state Clark could be if Mary doesn't help him is connected to her childhood trauma of her mother, who was mentally ill, who Mary wasn't able to help, obviously, because she was a child. So that's like the clever interpretation of it, but I don't really think that's giving them a lot of credit, I think. And the movie is a little more stupid than that, in my opinion. Like earlier, it literally said its own thesis out loud in the voiceover, so I don't really trust it to have this complex of a allegory. So in the final 15 minutes, it's revealed that an MRI company has been monitoring the back rooms, and at this point, I actually thought that I had just not understood any of the movie, and I was just wrong about my allegory, and like it must have been about something else. But then I realized, no, this is actually part of it. It's just part of it in a really stupid way. So it's because the MRI company is analyzing the back rooms in the same way that an MRI machine looks at somebody's brain. That's what the allegory is here. It's really bad, but I'm pretty sure that's what the point is. So then the final part of this allegory, in like the last shot, like the twist reveal, is that Mary is trapped in the back rooms. So I think it's supposed to be that like the back rooms represents Mary's mentally ill mind instead of Clark's, which doesn't really make sense. Like, it's connected to this half-baked subplot about like Mary's mom, but I don't know, it's kind of inscrutable. Like, it really doesn't make sense. I also read in some reviews online that the Mary subplot is supposed to be communicating some themes about gentrification, and I don't disagree with that. I'm sure that's something that's valid in this movie. I didn't really pick up on that. I don't think it was done well enough for that to be communicated to me, so I'm not really going to talk about that, because I think if it was intentional, it was done poorly, and in my opinion, it was probably unintentional. So, yeah. Really quickly, the final thing I wanted to talk about was CGI. So, for the most part, the effects in this movie are practical, and the sets are all real sets. There's not a ton of CGI for the most part, but there is this part where they use CGI, and it's like the worst possible part they could have used CGI for. And it's the faces of the backrooms creatures. And this really breaks my heart, because not only could they have used practical effects instead of CGI. Well, I think they did use practical effects for the creatures, and then they enhanced it with CGI, but they did the thing where they enhanced it so much it just looks like CGI, so there was no point. But they could have just done practical effects for these faces. It would have looked just as good. It would have looked better, in my opinion. And the CGI just dampens the message. The monstrosity of the backrooms creatures is supposed to represent mental illness, which is such a distinctly human thing, and it's a human experience. It's not something you can replace with computers, because it's something that happens in the human mind. So it should be real, physical, practical effects that represent that grittiness of a mentally unwell mind, instead of the smooth, sleek kind of uncanniness of a computer, in my opinion. So those were my thoughts on the Backrooms movie. I'm almost 100% sure there's going to be a sequel, because the movie made literally so much money. I think he's going to be the youngest director. Like, I don't know. Wait, what would he even be? He's the youngest, highest grossing director? That doesn't make sense. I'm kind of excited to see how this sequel shakes out because the Allegory is already so, like, in shambles by the end of this movie. I have no idea how they're going to carry that forward to the next one unless they just, like, start over and scrap it. Like, they have completely written themselves into a corner with this Allegory. But if the makers of the Backrooms movie have taught me anything, it's that when you're backed up against a wall, you should just try to walk right through it.